Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Liverpool.com podcast. I'm your host, Mo Stewart, and I'm joined by Ben Bocsak and James Martin. And this is potentially the last chance to really take a pause for breath before the helter-skelter ends to this season, where Liverpool could be gobbling up all the trophies and having all the fantastic times that we all hope will happen. But in this pause for breath, I think it's time to kind of, have a little bit of fun with things. And as March turns into April, we've reached awards season. Very much so. We've reached awards season. And so the PFA Awards, the Big Football Awards, the PFA Awards, the Football Writers Awards, these votes have been taking place across March, and the shortlist will come out in April. So that gives us a chance to do something similar. Now, the bookies will have you believe that there is no race for the PFA Player of the Year this year, Ben. It's a closed shop. Mo Salah has won it, all hands down. But as we know, as Liverpool fans, there have been many performers in our team who could, on any other year, if you take Mo Salah out of it, who probably would have been in the leading contenders. We have had so many top performers that it's tough to just pick out one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. It's a tough choice. You have, Virgil van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think even Alisson, and maybe Fabinho as well, having a case in there for player of the season. They've all been tremendous. And then obviously you have a few players outside of Liverpool as well who might think they have a shot, but we're not going to discuss them.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up, because this is where that we have to acknowledge the fact that bookies are there to make money. So if you look in the list for the PFA Player of the Year awards, in the bookie shortlist, you have the likes of Harry Kane, Cristiano Ronaldo, Bernardo Silva. Okay, you can understand it. I mean, it feels a little bit November, but there we are. The point is that the people that they're trying to make you bet on aren't necessarily the people who are going to win. But you're right, Ben. They are none of our business. This is a Liverpool podcast, and we've got enough trouble of our own. Because what I'm going to be asking us all to do today, I'll have to let you know, is we're going to be picking our top 5 Liverpool performers for this season. Sounds simple, doesn't it? But it's not. It really isn't. If you look at the top of the goals charts, you see 3 Liverpool players. The assist charts, 3 Liverpool players. Clean sheets, Liverpool players. Most goals scored, least conceded. I mean, the list literally goes on and on and on. If you look at the Premier League Player of the Month, we've already had 3 different players and potentially a 4th this month as well. So there are so many different players to choose from, and yet we all have our own opinions. That's kind of why we're paid to be here. So we will be giving those opinions, and we will allow you, the general public, to make your own decisions based upon how you feel about our decisions. Now, the format for this, everyone's going to get a chance to read out your top 5 in descending order. So 5th to 1st. Yes, that's descending. No, that's ascending order. Anyway, 5th to 1st. You'll get a chance, 30 seconds, to talk about each person, to give your case as to why you believe they are included. And then once your list is complete, the others of us will have a chance to rebut, as they say. Now, this is just for fun. I want to reiterate this out there now. This is just for fun. There are no winners and losers, or unless you do something really stupid. But it will be fun to see how you, the public, feel about what our choices are. So we will allow you to vote on which you think is the best, as well as putting your top 5s in the comments, as I'm sure you will. So the question is, who gets to go first? Now, seeing as the 2 of you are looking at me nervously, and I came up with this whole thing myself, I'm going to go first. How's that? Okay. So first up, my number 5th player, and I have to tell you all, I'm not even joking. I gave myself a bit of a sleepless night thinking about this last night, because some of the people who I'm leaving out of this top 5, I feel bad about, because they've been outstanding, but they just didn't make my top 5. So moving swiftly on, number 5, Fabinho. Now, I think we're all quite aware of the value of Fabinho to our team, but I think this season it's kind of taken itself to another level. Not just in his partnership with Thiago, which obviously is fantastic, but I've just seen the way that he gives us so much protection it allows everybody else, so many of our other players, to perform because of the way he works and because of what it is that he does. And he's added goals to his game this season, which is a pleasant surprise. I don't think anyone was really expecting it. But the simple fact is that he's, as I said, he's taken an already elite game to another level. The best in his position in the whole league. I won't hear a word of it. So, Fabinho, and he's at 5. Right. Number 4, James won't be surprised to hear, Joel Matip. Joel, I mean, what can we say about Joel Matip that I haven't said literally every week so far we've been doing shows? He's been a revelation. He has been able to keep himself fit, and we've all seen the benefit of it. He's started to get recognition outside of Liverpool, which warms my heart as well. But his defensive work is so good. He's so underrated, because you'll find every single striker who comes to play against Liverpool, they're going to try and work on Matip, because no one wants to try that guy next to him. And so he has to be tested game in, game out, in the air and on the floor, and he is meeting that test. And then we talk about him at the other end of the pitch, the dribbles, the passes, and now, thankfully, the goals as well. Joel Matip, what can I say? Number 3. I'm picking what might be a surprise to some, because, again, he's someone who's so good, it's almost like we forget it. But Alisson Becker has been absolutely fantastic. And there have been so many moments in the last couple of months where he has saved us at points where we've needed saving. He has kept this run going so many times without almost... We forget about it by the end of the game, because the goals that decide the game normally decide our talking points, and they're normally the ones that get the headlines. But I mean, I'm not just talking about the Arsenal game, which is the first one that came to my mind, but there have been quite a few games. I think about the games against Inter, particularly the home game. But he is one of those guys who just is quietly efficient in what he does, aside from the time where he decides to give everyone a heart attack, of course. But I kind of love him more for that, I'm not going to lie. Okay, so the top 2. My number 2 best player of the season is Mohamed Salah, which I already can see is caused quite consternation. But hear me out. Well, I don't really need to tell you about why Mo Salah's been good. We all know Mo Salah's been good. He's been superb. He has been the best player in the league, and he's carried that mantle well. Obviously, in the last couple of, well, I'd say the last month of the season, maybe starting to show a bit of coming down to maybe a 7 out of 10 and an 8 out of 10 instead of a 9 or a 10. But he is still a dangerous customer. He is still affecting every game he plays in. And I expect him to continue to the end of the season. And I expect him to win all these awards as well. So the fact that I've placed him at number 2 is really not going to lose him too much sleep. But I had to give props to the number 1, the best player for Liverpool this season, Trent Alexander-Arnold. And the reason why I put Trent at number 1 and Mo Salah at number 2 is really quite simple. Trent has to do it at both ends of the pitch. And we've talked about the fact that the struggles that he has had to overcome at the other end of the pitch over the course of this season. And I do believe he has overcome them. I think a lot of the time we are fixating on things that don't matter ultimately to the overall picture. So, for example, the Martinelli game where Martinelli got past him on 2 or 3 occasions. Liverpool didn't concede a goal in that game. Everybody was very clear that that was the objective, and the objective was met. And then when you take it to the other end of the pitch, he is doing things that not only is no one else doing, that nobody has seen before. The kind of influence he has, not just in terms of the chances created. He locks down that whole right side. Yes, it helps that he's got Mohamed Salah alongside him in that area, and even Jordan Henderson. But if you look at the map for the most dangerous passers across the pitch, he is covered from the top all the way to the bottom of that right side of the pitch, and some in the center as well. And you just think about a Liverpool team. I was telling you we were playing Man City tomorrow, which one player would you take out of the team who'd make the biggest difference? It's Trent. And for that reason, he's my number 1. Okay, so I'll open the floor to all kinds of comments slash accusations. James, I'll start with you. Do you
Yeah.
have anything to say?
Well, a few things. I mean, there's one headline omission there, which I imagine we'll touch upon later in more detail. Well, we certainly will when I go through my list. But you've left out Virgil van Dijk. You mentioned, of course, Joel Matip is the one who gets tested more because no one wants to take on Virg. Well, I mean, there's a reason no one wants to take him on, and that's because he is back to his best, isn't he? He has been exceptional, particularly in the last month or two. I mean, maybe I need to cut up my Joel Matip fan card. I don't know, but I couldn't bring myself to put Matip in over Van Dijk. Matip has been amazing, and if it was a case of who has defied expectations the most, Matip would be top of my list, as he is top of so many of my lists in life. But in terms of just purely who has had the better season, I think it's tricky to make the case for Matip ahead of Van Dijk.
Wow. I mean, allow me to do so. Because obviously I did. This was what gave me sleepless nights. Like, I feel like I've apologized in private to Virgil many times before coming out doing it publicly. But the reasons why, and one of them is slightly unfair, is the fact that we expect greatness from Virgil. And as bad as both injuries were, I think more people were confident that we would get the Virgil we're seeing now back than with the Matip that we were seeing. Because if we rewind to the beginning of this season, there was serious concern as to whether he would ever get back. And whether this was the point where, okay, his injuries are just going to become more and more of an issue. We have to start sidelining him. And he's been amazing. And I believe in the first few weeks of the season, as Virgil was getting himself back, Matip did take a larger amount of the load. And I give him credit for that too. Those are the only two things. But you're right. Virgil has been fantastic. He has deserved all the plaudits that I'm sure the two of you are going to give him. But yeah, I had to make my own choices. Ben, what jumps out at you from my list?
I mean, it's not that I disagree with Fabinho's selection, but obviously some notable absentees. And you mentioned how Liverpool have 3 of the top goal scorers in the Premier League, and among, I think, the top assist charts as well. And you missed out quite a few of those players on there, so that was an interesting choice for sure. I mean, I know both Diogo Jota and Sadio Mane have had patchy forms, not been perhaps as consistent, but they've still scored more goals than some of the other candidates for the awards. So that says a lot about Liverpool's season on the whole, I think.
Yeah, that's a fair shout. I mean, my team is quite defensive centric. If you think about it, it's got 3 defenders and a keeper. And this is a season where Liverpool scored more goals than anyone else, so you can say it's a bit strange, but I think you are right. I mean, I gave consideration to both Mane and Jota. I do think that in terms of their influence on our season, they've been superb. They've been fantastic. They've more than done their job. I think Mane in particular is almost like he's clawing his way back to where he wants to be. It's almost like it's just that kind of undefeatable determination in him to just be like, I'm not going to let this be the end of my career. And so I think we all love Sadio because of that. But it's a hard school. I can only pick 5. And to be honest, you're about to find out exactly how hard school it is, Ben, because it's your turn next.
Yeah, I mean, straight off with the 5th selection, mine was between Fabinho and Diogo Jota, because I think Fabinho has been brilliant. But I'm trying to put sort of my PFA thinking hat on, and I think Diogo Jota would get it purely just because his stats are more impressive than Fabinho's. Even though Fabinho has 4 goals in the Premier League, Diogo Jota is up there, competing for the top goal scorer award. I mean, he's still a bit behind Mohamed Salah, but he's in terms of the other competition, he's well up there. And I think he's been a very underrated presence in the Liverpool team. He was vital in January when Salah and Mane went off to AFCON. And I think he's just been reliable, and you can always count on him even when he's playing badly to score.
It's the best trait to have as a striker.
Yeah, and then as my fourth choice, I didn't go for Matip. I went with Van Dijk, just because it might be a less controversial opinion, but I just think he's been brilliant, particularly in the last few months. Maybe there was a few question marks over him when he first came back, but it was obviously going to take a bit of time for him to settle after that injury. And I think now in the last few months we've seen the best of him, and he's been very dominant. And as a result, Liverpool's clean sheet tally has kept going up and up, and that's also one of the reasons why I picked Alisson as my third choice as well. Just because, I mean, I don't know where Liverpool would be without him, to be honest. Some of the saves he's made in the Premier League, but also outside the Premier League, he's kept Liverpool in the game at times, and he's been vital. Again, after last season's contribution, without him, I don't think Liverpool would be in the Champions League. But once again, he's proved that he's probably one of the best goalkeepers in the world. And I think if goalkeepers don't tend to win the award, do they? But if there was a chance, I think he should be well up there. He's been by far and away the best goalkeeper in the Premier League this season. Then for second place, I went with Trent. Sort of kept my options safe there as well. But like you mentioned, Trent's been brilliant. I think it's his best season in a Liverpool shirt. I would go as far as saying that it's been his best campaign. He's been terrific in sort of like drifting more to that central role. This season we've seen him do that more often, and he's improved defensively as well. And I think the stats show that as well. In the summer, there was loads of debates about, Trent can't defend, that's why he doesn't get picked for England. But I think that debate after this season is moot. Even if someone like Martinelli maybe potentially had a good game against him, although Klopp would beg to differ, and he came out with a very vehement response after the game saying, if anyone still doubts his defensive qualities, just watch that game. And I think I'd agree with Klopp. I think although on the eye it looked like Martinelli had the better of the two, I think Trent handled it well. And going forward, I think there's nothing that needs to be said. His numbers speak for themselves.
Well, I mean, I think Klopp threatened to knock anyone out who said that they would question Trent's defense again. So
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure that debate's over. I'm pretty sure no one wants to get that.
Maybe it'll be Will Smith #2 at the PFA Awards if he doesn't get the award. Who knows?
Well, let's hope not. James, first.
I haven't gone for my number one yet.
Oh, sorry, of course. I almost assumed what was going to happen.
It's Takumi Minamino.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, it's probably no surprise, but I've gone with Mohamed Salah as my number one. He's just been superhuman this season. I don't think he's just been the best player in the league, but he's been the best player in the world for me. And if he can get more trophies with Liverpool, I think that will be reflected in not just the PFA awards, but also the Ballon d'Or, which he deserves to get, I think, after this year.
Now, the Ballon d'Or point is interesting because that is very much going to be the next thing on his radar, particularly if they get over the line in this World Cup qualifying. He gets to go and have a World Cup. Now, that World Cup happens just before the vote takes place. So I'm sure there's going to be quite a few people looking to put a finer point on their portfolios for that. But you are right. He has been the best player in the world this season. I think there are some players who will put their hand up. I think Karim Benzema is another one, just off the top of my head. But I think it's a live debate that no one would say that he's not in that conversation for sure. Obviously, I still put him as number 2. I have to acknowledge that. I still believe that to this Liverpool team, Trent's performances have been more remarkable, but we won't get into that. James, I ask again, what is your initial thoughts on Ben's list?
I need to give one more thought on this whole Trent thing, because I sort of overlooked that when I was still so shocked by the Van Dijk exclusion in yours. I'm just going to quickly, I mean, obviously there's not really too many complaints. He's been exceptional. He's going to be high up everyone's list. But in terms of your logic on it, I mean, a lot of what you said applies to Andy Robertson, who has so far been suspiciously absent from everyone's list. I mean, he contributes hugely defensively, arguably even more so than Trent. And then at the other end, he's almost matching him for assists again. It's gone under the radar because Trent, probably the game is run through him a little bit more. But in terms of the actual output of goal contributions, he's really not far behind. So just a word for Andy Robertson, because I mean, spoilers, I'm not going to mention him in my list either. But for the reasons that you gave in terms of this is why he's number one, that really did make me feel for Andy Robertson, who could make possibly a similar case on the other side.
Yeah, that's a fair shout. It is.
Yeah,
it is.
It's a fair point, I would say. But you probably answered the question, how Trent. You said that the game runs through Trent. So I think that's why he's probably higher up on the list, because he's kind of more in control of Liverpool's attacking phase than whereas Robertson, who just kind of gets on in the end of assists, he tends to go on the overlap and cross one in. I think he's less of a creative force in that sense. And I think the statistics probably reflect that in terms of creating actions per 90 and stuff like that when it comes to Trent. That's the only reason I can think of, but it's absolutely fair. I mean, Andy Robertson has been tremendous and exceptional, and I think it's just a statement of how good Liverpool's squad is and starting 11 is that, we're having this debate and this discussion really.
100%. I mean, Robertson on the heat map for progressive passes that I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Trent, Robertson also features on that in the kind of inside left byline position. But yeah, his influence isn't quite as spread or across or as deep ingrained. But yeah, shout outs to Robbo because he has been fantastic. James, I believe it's your turn.
Yeah, it's a tough gig going last because obviously a lot of my reasoning is similar to what's been said before, so maybe I'll keep it a little bit briefer, but I'll explain my order if nothing else. So yeah, in at number 5, I had Alisson as well. So yeah, that says it all about his season that all three of us have named a goalkeeper to the short list. You mentioned, Mo, it might be a controversial one, and it's not really panned out that way, at least between us. He's been exceptional. Ben touched upon how he's been good in lots of different departments, and I think that's the key to it. He's not just an elite sweeper, he's not just an elite shot stopper, he's not just elite at coming and claiming crosses. He does a bit of everything, and he does it all very, very well. There was this chart I saw, I can't give too much detail on it, unfortunately, it was a little while ago, but it basically was combining all of those components into a kind of Venn diagram in terms of who's good at what, and it was just literally, it was Alisson and Neuer were the only two right there in the middle. They are just complete goalkeepers. No one can really come close in that regard. You look at other goalkeepers who've had good seasons, and you can point to one thing normally, which is like, okay, but that's the flaw in their game. So De Gea is the obvious example, still an elite shot stopper, but in terms of the sweeping, in terms of other aspects of the more kind of modern goalkeeper, he's maybe falls short in that regard. But yeah, Alisson has it all. I felt harsh putting him 5th, to be honest, but it's just a mark of the quality of other contenders, which moves me on to number 4, where I had Virgil van Dijk. I'm again so sorry, Joel Matip, but as I talked about when critiquing your list, Mo, I just felt like my hands were tied. Like you say, it was a good point about the start of the season. I do agree the first few weeks, Matip maybe hit the ground running a little bit more than Van Dijk. There was a little bit of concern, will Van Dijk get back to those best in the world levels? It was such a bad injury to get at what is not, the youngest of ages. But once again, he's just bounced back as this ridiculous physical specimen who can just do it all. Particularly in the last month or two, I would say we've really seen the kind of true pre-injury Van Dijk, which has been a relief, and it's come at a vital time in terms of the run-in. Come the end of the season, what Liverpool win will be, a lot down to those performances. If he'd still been taking the full season to get back to his best, which would have been, perfectly understandable. It was a shocking injury, but I think Liverpool's chances of silverware would have been greatly impacted, whereas the return to that level has been key. And it's telling that when Konate does get rotated in, it's typically for Joel Matip, the player who has to play when he's available. When Liverpool need to win these games, is Virgil van Dijk. But he's still only fourth, so that again says a lot about players above him. And yeah, I had Fabinho up in third. I think he's been exceptional. It was almost tempting to throw Thiago into the mix because those two have had such a good pairing, and they've only lost one game together now. Finally lost the record in that last game, but doesn't really count because it was the Inter Milan game where we won the tie. So it's like, well, okay, we lost. What a shame. Well, we'll cry about it in the next round of the Champions League, sort of thing. But he's just, he makes everything work. Liverpool could not play even close to the way they play without him in the side. We saw that a little bit last season when he had to be dropped into centre back at times. He was very good at centre back, which shows how versatile he is. But yeah, he is the anchor of the side. He lets other people bomb on a bit. He's allowed Klopp to tweak that midfield a little bit this season, where a lot more goals have come from the midfield. We're at 19 goals from non-forwards this season compared to 13 throughout the whole of last season. So I think a lot of that is down to Fabinho, not in terms of just him scoring goals, which has been very handy, but in terms of allowing the likes of Henderson, Oxlade-Chamberlain, when they're playing to get forward a bit more. They've both doubled their tallies from last season. And so, yeah, I think a lot of that is down to Fabinho and that kind of anchoring presence. And yeah, that unbeaten record with Thiago was quite something. You just, whenever they were named together, which was annoyingly rare because of Thiago's injury problems, but you'd think, yeah, okay, this, we're not going to lose this game. And that kind of air of invincibility comes with all of the best players. You get it a bit with Van Dijk, you get it a bit with Fabinho. And he could even have been higher, but I think third is probably about right because of the two we've discussed so much on this show. First is going to come as no surprise, but second, yeah, Trent Alexander-Arnold. I totally see your case. I mean, he could be first. He is the hardest to sort of plug in someone else in the team for, but that's partly in terms of the squad profile. I mean, you look at the left. You might have said the same about Robertson, but then we plucked Tsimikas out of nowhere, and suddenly we have a very adept deputy. Whereas, Trent Alexander-Arnold had such a unique profile as a player, so I don't think there's anyone out there who could be a Tsimikas equivalent. So it's not purely in terms of the Liverpool squad profile, but I do think that maybe influences how we view it in terms of how irreplaceable someone is. Just because he's irreplaceable within the squad doesn't necessarily mean that he's entirely without peers, although he almost is, let's be fair. But he's had a remarkable season. Potentially consistency. I mean, you can't really argue it. Once he got going, it was just never looked back sort of thing. He's been very good. The new role has been interesting to watch. That kind of, you mentioned, Mo, how he's been influential in the pockets of space, sort of coming in from the right as well as just purely on the bylines, on the touchline. So yeah, that's probably why he is so far above Robertson in these conversations. Again, feels so bad for Robertson, but it is that kind of, he is the team's chief playmaker, really, which didn't seem possible from right back even a few years ago. He's changed the game. Credit to Klopp as well, who's changed the game with the tactical innovation, if you like. Obviously, there's shades of Guardiola in it, but it's in terms of, it's a unique role in football. There's no one who interprets it quite like Alexander-Arnold, and there's no manager who gives the right back the freedom to interpret it quite like he does. So yeah, definitely a worthy inclusion in that top two, but couldn't look past Salah as number one. He's gone off the boil a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but that's by his own ridiculously high standards. And he set out the traps so fast. He bought himself quite a lot of leeway in that regard. He's still broadly on track to get close to his own records, which for the most part are also the league records. So yeah, it's been a remarkable campaign. And yeah, much as I said with Van Dijk, any success at the end of the season, you'll look back and say, yeah, Salah was the reason that was possible. I mean, we wouldn't have had a title race to get back into had he not been so sensationally good in the first couple of months of the season. And yeah, lots of credit in the bank from that. And it's not like he's really dropped off. He's maybe the output's dropped a little bit, but as you said, even when he's not scoring, he's influential. And yeah, probably the best player in the world this season. Certainly the best player in the Premier League.
There's no doubt that he will win this award. Ben, there's not really a massive difference between James's pick and yours, to be honest. So I'm not sure you're going to have much to disagree with.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned Thiago, because I think we can all agree if he had played more games, if he had been more available, he would definitely be on all of our lists. I hope that's not too presumptuous of me to assume that you guys would both include him, but he has been brilliant when he has played, and I think he makes a huge difference to Liverpool when he is involved. And for me, he would definitely be in with the running. And who knows, if the voting maybe took place in May, then he might have more of a chance of being on that list as well.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation when we're doing the voting, because there are still quite a lot to be decided before the end of the season. But I mean, these players, they've got holidays to book, so they can't be sitting at home voting for the season where they've got to be on their yachts or whatever. But we are doing our votes now, and that is what we have done. So let's do a quick recap before we end, and then open the floor to our public vote. So my list was as follows: Fabinho at 5. Matip at 4, Alisson at 3, Salah at 2, and Trent at 1. Now, Ben, your list was Jota at 5, Van Dijk at 4, Alisson at 3, Trent at 2, and Salah at 1.
Yeah.
And for James, you had Alisson at 5, Van Dijk at 4, Fabinho at 3, Trent at 2, and Salah at 1. Now, I feel like in the public vote, you two might split it, so I might end up winning this thing, which I'm actually quite pleased about. But I'm also quite pleased I managed to remember all of those names in the order that they came in. So kudos to me, even if I don't win. I think something we can all agree on, though, is that we've got a very exciting team full of very, very, very good footballers. We didn't even get a chance to talk about the young player of the year, Ibrahima Konate, the signing of the season, which might also be Konate, could also be Luis Diaz. But it's been fun to think about how many of our players have been performing at their very best this season, particularly when you consider what still might be to come. But we've reached the end of our time, guys. We've had fun. We'll have to wait and see next week what you all made of it. But I hope you enjoyed the discussion at least.